We're discussing basically the last, I don't know if it's 13 or 14 chapters of the first section of Tanya, are really discussing very important meditations on how to develop the right feelings. That's what we're talking about. Let's remind ourselves who the Alter Rebbe is addressing and what his point is. The Alter Rebbe, the author of Tanya, is addressing us, the regular, normal Jewish people who are, on one hand, we understand there's a God, and we understand that there's a responsibility as a Jew to serve Hashem, and we'd like to do the right thing, but unfortunately, we're challenged. We're human beings, and we have an animal soul, and we have imperfections, and the Alter Rebbe is giving us the tools how to overcome our challenges, and it's phenomenal. You'd think this advanced manuscript that the Alter Rebbe wrote a few hundred years ago will be talking to spiritual giants who, living in a very lofty and spiritual life. No, the Alter Rebbe is talking to regular people like me and like you who go through every day more inspired moments and less inspired moments, challenges. We have our things that we really are excited and motivated by, things that we aren't motivated by, and he's helping us channel our inner self, helping us channel that our neshama, our soul, should overcome the challenges that our animal soul puts in front of us. Meaning we're human beings. I'd rather stay in bed. I'd rather not sit so long and say the entire benching, or I'd rather do something that's not necessarily permitted. And the Alter Rebbe is giving us the tools how to develop feelings and how to develop emotions which will drive us to approach our relationship with Hashem in a much more, not just practical way, but a way that results and provokes proper responses in our behavior. So in this chapter, he introduces 3 meditations. One is a very general one is a particular one, and then one is a very particular one. But before we begin with the meditations, I just want to take a step back and address 1 or 2 thoughts that we started with in the previous discussion. Just think about the concept. What was so special about the fact that the Jewish people at Mount Sinai said Na'aseh v'nishma? One of the famous moments in Jewish history, we're coming up in a few weeks to the giving of the Torah, the anniversary when God gave the Torah to the Jewish people, just a couple weeks away. And we know what's the great moment that the Jewish people were approached by God. Do you want to accept my Torah? And they said, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and we will accept. We will listen. What does that mean? It means we understood the relationship here. And this is key. God is not equal to us, obviously. God is the relationship of a king and a subject. In a king and a subject, you have that the king is way, way, way above the subject. The subject is insignificant. And when the subject is approached by the king, would you like to do me a favor? It's not a question here, what's the favor? What is the thing you're asking me to do? It is a moment to recognize suddenly, in the eyes of the king, I matter, and he needs me. If I accept that relationship, that's one approach to the whole relationship with God and the Jewish people. I recognize that this relationship is not about me doing a favor for a friend, or me accepting this, a favor or doing something for somebody who isn't equal to me. Theoretically, I am insignificant. My actions don't matter. I am imperfect. Nevertheless, God says, I have a particular interest in you, and a particular interest in you doing what I ask you to do. And this is the first premise of this chapter. The premise of this chapter, Tanya, good morning, Talia, good morning, Karen. The premise of this chapter is that God is telling the Jewish person and the Jewish people as a whole, but more importantly, the Jewish individual, not only you matter, but what you do matters and affects all of mankind and all of the universe. In other words, there's a phenomenal statement in the Talmud that says that if the nations of the world would have known how much they benefited from the services in the temple, rather than allow a nation, the Babylonians or the Romans, to come and destroy the temple, they would have built a defense mechanism and built a protection around the temple and no one should touch it. Meaning, the benefit that the world has from the actions that the Jew does is incredible. People always say, there's some anti-Semitic concepts that the Jewish people feel they run the world, do run the world. There's a certain truth to one part of it. The actions of a Jew impacts the entire universe. What you do is not a private experience because the Jewish person was chosen by God with a particular mission. And if we do our mission, we are not just impacting ourselves and our family, we're impacting all of mankind, all of the universe, and all of the higher worlds, all of the worlds where the angels live. One of the famous teachings of Hasidus is, it says, Da malamayla mimach. Know what is above you. And the purpose of the statement is meant to inspire a person that God is watching you. Know what is above you. There's a God, there's someone watching. The Maggid of Mezrich, I believe was the Maggid, he explained another way to read this statement. Da malamayla. Know that which is above, mimach comes from you. In other words, your actions create the reality above. The angels in heaven are waiting for your actions so they can do what they have to do. The heavenly spheres are waiting for your actions. So your actions are not just important for yourself, it's important for all of mankind and for all of the universe. So the first premise that the Alter Rebbe is making in this chapter is, know that your actions matter not just as a small detail, part of a large picture, but just you as an individual, what you do will affect all of the universe, will affect everything. It all depends on you. So the first of the three meditations that we have in this chapter in Tanya is, know that God decided and chose that what you do matters to the point that it affects all of the world. And not only that, God is standing and waiting and watching to see what you're going to do. You might say, listen, who am I? I'm not a perfect person. I'm not that religious. I don't do everything right. Nevertheless, God is waiting by your Shabbos table. Are you lighting the Shabbos candles or not? So the first meditation is to realize this basic relationship of how great God is, how insignificant I am, and yet I matter. I matter to the point, not just amongst everybody else, it is all about me. The entire universe is waiting for me, and what am I going to do? And the consequences and the benefit of my actions really make a difference. And that is really the first meditation the Alter Rebbe introduces here, this tremendous understanding. And this is based on the idea of respect. What does respect mean? Respect here means accepting the yoke of responsibility. I accept the king as my king. I know my place. And this is true in every relationship, that it's important to have the respect and to have the acknowledgement of your role in the relationship. As a Jew, it's many, many more times more so applicable. That's the first opening statement of this chapter, of chapter 41. Then we're coming now to the second part of this chapter, and that's on page 112. And we're going to start from, we said basically, and someone should think about this every single day according to his ability and his mind and his heart, according to your time, according to your level of understanding, before you study Torah, before you do a mitzvah. For an example, before you wrap yourself in talis and put on tefillin. What is unique about these two examples of talis and tefillin? As we'll see, talis and tefillin really are metaphors for a lot of Judaism. I'll take a moment to talk about it. Talis and tefillin, and by the way, just as a side point, a person might think to themselves, 1 second, I'm a man, or I'm a woman, and I don't do the other mitzvah, meaning a woman says, I don't put on tefillin. A man might say, I don't light Shabbos candles. The truth is, when God created a soul, he gave a soul parts of it in the woman's body, part of it in the man's body, and every single man and woman have a relationship with another soul. And when that have, usually we're very fortunate, and we find that soul and we marry that person and we become a partner. And sometimes we don't find that soul. But when that soul does the mitzvah, I benefit from it. So if I am a part of a soul, and that soul puts on tefillin, and I'm let's say a woman who doesn't put on tefillin, when her husband or her soul partner puts on tefillin, she benefits. And when she does the mitzvahs that apply to a woman, he benefits. And the same thing is true with people who don't have a nature of being a Kohen or a Levi. Every soul benefits other souls. And many souls, it says, even come back a second time and a third time to this world to have a chance to fulfill all types of mitzvahs if they missed it out. But the bottom line is, talis and tefillin really represent a lot of Judaism, and especially in the light of Hasidus. Let's take for a second the tefillin. Tefillin is placed on the arm of a person right next to their heart. And the tefillin is also placed on the head next to the brain. The two aspects that we talk so much about in Chassidus to understand the relationship with God is to take our heart and our mind and connect them to Hashem. We'll see a little further in this chapter some more about this particular meditation. But the idea of tefillin really is to say, I have a mind, and I have a thought process, and I have a way I think, and I have a perspective, I have my cognitive powers. I want to channel all of that to serve Hashem. And the same thing is my heart. I have a heart that generally the heart's put as a place where we have feelings. It has things that I'm attracted to, things that I have a disdain for, things that make me feel good, things that make me feel uncomfortable. To channel my heart and my mind to serve Hashem. That's the tefillin. What's the talus? A talus, oftentimes we see people put them on like a shawl over their neck like a scarf. A talus really, it says in the code of Jewish law, has to wrap your entire body. It says similar to the way that the Arabs used to wear their big robes. In other words, it has to encompass you completely. In Judaism, the point of Yiddishkeit is not to have an isolated incident that I put on tefillin or I light Shabbos candles. It doesn't affect my character. We have to be completely enwrapped in our mitzvahs. It has to have an effect and an impact on us completely. The talus and tefillin really are great examples of a mitzvah that one will do that really affects and encompasses your heart, your mind, and clothes you completely. In addition, it's how you start your day. The first thing we do in our day, once we do our basic technical, personal needs, or we wash negavas, modani, take a shower, brush our teeth, have a coffee, first thing we do is davening. So again, the start of our day with this attitude, so he begins in the Tanya here that, for an example, this meditation, this general meditation, that I am a subject of God, and I am accepting God as my king, and I understand the relationship, that is the first meditation that one should think about. And by the way, I'm not sure how many of us tried this since last time we had a class. Well, you should know that if you talk to people that do it, it's a very impactful meditation. If we would take 5 minutes, that's it, in the morning, after we get our basic stuff done, whether it's whatever we do in the morning, I'm ready to start our day now. Take 5 minutes, sit down in the chair, and you remind yourself that you're a Jew. That's Sinai accepted God as a king, and now God needs me, and He's waiting for me. Even if we're not such profound, pious people, even if we're not such deep, spiritual giants, it has an impact. The nature of a human being is when we think about something, it impacts us. If we think about something comfortable, it makes us relaxed. If we think about something that demands or creates anxiety, it makes us anxious. If we think about things that relate to Hashem, it affects our behavior. And the reality is, if someone does this for 5 minutes a day, even if you're not a holy person, even if we're not giants, it actually changes the way you go about your day in a real way. It's tremendous. Okay. That was the first. That was the first meditation. Now he's telling us meditation number 2. For those who are following inside, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th line on page 112. After we have this general meditation of what we call the respect, what we call developing an awe for Hashem in our relationship, knowing our role, our responsibility, and how God is waiting for us personally to act. Now he tells you that's in general how to start your day. Then he tells you now, before you do a mitzvah, there's an additional meditation, meditation number 2. And really the rest of this time is going to have a lot of meditations or things to contemplate about, we call it contemplations, of impactful ways to change the way we approach a mitzvah. The next one, he says something fascinating. If we would have in front of us, I don't know who today one would consider the most respected or most important figure of in our lives or in the world. If it's a president, if it's a king, if it's a Einstein, if you're a musician, who is your greatest role model? If that person would come to you wrapped up in a fur coat, it would be silly to say, it's not really the person. I don't feel like you're here. I don't feel like the person's here because they're wrapped up in a fur coat. It's the same person. They're in the room with you. The respect that you have to give them, the feeling of awe, or for that matter, the love. Let's say you have a child that you haven't seen in a year because they went out of town, or someone you love, a close friend, and you haven't seen them in a year, and they come to see you. If they're wrapped up in a coat, you don't say, I don't really feel like, like you're the same person. You're the same exact person except you're wearing a coat. Hashem has something called the essence of God, God's essence. Or we can call it also the will of Hashem. the essence inside desire. What does God really want? God infuses that into certain behaviors. And when you do that behavior, you bond with that oneness of God. You see, there's two ways to look at a mitzvah. One way to look at a mitzvah, or let's take an example, doing a favor for somebody. One way of doing a favor for somebody, let's say a person comes to you and says, I really, really I have a dream of going to Israel. And you buy the person a plane ticket, or you take them to Israel. So one way to see it is, look what I did. I took the person to Israel. That's the action. That's nice. Another way to see it is, I fulfilled a deep desire of this person. It could have been going to Hawaii. It could have been learning how to make a certain dish or learn to play the violin. It could have been that I bought them a red sports car. It doesn't make a difference. It wasn't about the action. It was about getting in touch with something that meant a lot to this person, and I did it. Something that sometimes we don't understand. There are times that a child or a friend has a desire that you can't relate to it, or you don't even think it's a good idea. But because you love them, you'll help them do it. I'm not talking about something that's detrimental to them, because I know if you're a good friend, you won't help them. But we're talking about something which you don't necessarily agree with. You think it's a silly idea. But if it means a lot to them, then it means a lot to you. It's no different to a child who's 5 years old or 4 years old and is very upset about his broken cookie or his crayon that snapped in half or the wrong color lollipop, which is a meaningless thing. But because you love the child, you care. And you'll do what you can to get the one, unless you're not spoiling him or her. You'll do what you can to help him achieve his goal or her goal. Why? Because it's not about the lollipop. It's about what the child really wants. The same thing is true of Hashem. Hashem gave us mitzvah. So one way to see a mitzvah is, I'm doing this mitzvah, I'm touching the lulav and the esrog, and I'm touching the two things together, and I'm making spiritual, someone's phone's making a bit of noise. I'm making a spiritual connection with some action. That's one way to see it. Hold on 1 second. I just want to just mute this sound here. Sorry. All right. All right, it's not muting. I don't know why. Okay. So basically, one way to see it is that I am doing the particular mitzvah. Another way is I am connecting to the inner will, to the inner desire of what Hashem wants. It's called Ratzon Elyon. And God's inner desire is enclosed in this mitzvah. It makes no difference what the mitzvah is. So the second meditation is going to be, what I'm going to say right now, is that when I do a mitzvah, not only do I understand my relationship and my position as God's subject, and He's counting on me, but every single mitzvah that I do, regardless of the mitzvah, regardless of what the mitzvah is, I am revealing it's like taking off the coat. I am revealing the truth. I'm taking off the curtain, and I'm revealing God's will, God's desire in this world. It changes the perspective of what a mitzvah is. A mitzvah is not just some action that seems to be spiritual. A mitzvah is revealing the will of Hashem. I am making my child happy. I got him the lollipop that he wants. I'm getting my friend the ticket they needed. I got them a ride to the place. I'm doing something that matters to you, and your inner desire is being fulfilled. So a mitzvah is fulfilling the inner desire of God. It's the next step in approaching a mitzvah. Okay, let's see this inside. But Gam Yisbainin, also you should meditate and think about that the endless greatness of God, the essence of God. We'll get back to these words in a moment. That which encompasses the world and that which fills the world, and I'll get back to that in a second. That is the will that God has in His highest form. Those words are enclosed in the letters of the Torah that I'm studying, or the wisdom of the Torah, or in the tzitzis, or the tefillin, or the tefillin. So when you read the Torah, or you put on the tefillin or the talis, you're drawing down godliness, God's essence into the world. That means you're bringing down godliness into your essence of your soul. Now, we have like 5, 6 very important ideas in these last 3 lines, and I'll try and cover them in the next few minutes. Number 1, we use the expression Seviv K'almin and Mamali K'almin. We had it earlier in the chapter, and we explained it very briefly, that God has 2 general ways how He invests Himself in this world. How God is involved with the world, let's say, there's 2 general ways. And this is an idea all over Hasidus, and it's a good idea to know. The metaphor given for this is how a soul gives life to a body in two general ways. One way is that the soul gives life to the body. It doesn't treat the head any different than the toes. It gives life and you're alive. While it's true that the head is a much more refined and important element of your existence and your identity as a person and your body, physiologically, biologically, mentally, functionally, your head, your eyes, your ears have tremendous function that the rest of your body doesn't have. But the amount of being alive, a dead or alive person, is the finger and the head is equally alive. Meaning, there's a level that the soul comes into the body that doesn't differentiate between the different levels. And this is an important idea as we develop a knowledge of Hasidus to understand how within the world, godliness, God is the same presence in your backyard as he is in the temple. God is equally in Tennessee as he is in Jerusalem. And that level is no difference because God didn't lower himself down, so to speak, to say, okay, now I'm taking into consideration the various levels of existence of the physical earth. No. God is relating in a way where he doesn't consider your perfections and your imperfections, your greatness and your lowliness. He is the same in Jerusalem as in Tennessee, as in Uman, as in Mecca. The same everywhere. That is called Sovev. That is called God expressing himself, manifesting himself in the world, where he doesn't consider the recipient. If it goes everywhere equally. The truth is, as you mentioned last week, this is a much, much, much greater, grander, and bigger idea than anything that we'll find in this world. Why is that? The metaphor we gave last week was about the subconscious of a person. The subconscious of a person is billions, not millions, but billions of times more active and more alive and more operating than your conscious level. On the conscious level, you're focused on one tiny thing, what I feel, what I see, what I'm saying, what I'm doing. It's nothing. It doesn't take into consideration that subconsciously your digestive system is working and your chemistry is working and your feelings deep inside of you, how you react and respond to every single person that walks by you. If it makes you uncomfortable or comfortable, there's a world that when you get ideas, where do ideas come from? Everything comes from somewhere. There's a deep wealth of your subconscious self. That's Sovev. It doesn't manifest itself in any particular way. Every now and then we become aware of it because some of the idea pops into our head or we realize that our body's functioning in a certain way. The Sovev is like the subconscious. It is operating without being noticeably there, but it is there more. One of the reasons, by the way, why we say God created the world, we say something from nothing. Something from nothing. God, we are nothing. God is something. We became nothing from something. The ultimate something created nothing. When we say nothing, we mean that which we can't see or touch or define. There's a tremendous level of existence that we can't relate to. It's out of our. So we call that nothing. Like we're the idea. It came out of nowhere. No, it came out of somewhere, but we call it nowhere because we didn't see where it came from. So there's our subconscious level, or the Sovev, which is a tremendous level of godliness in this world that we can't tap into regularly, but it's there and gives a general life form and direction and function to the world. But it doesn't differentiate between the different levels of recipients, whether it's Jerusalem, whether it's your mind, your heart, etc. That's called Sovev, and we can go into it more as we develop further in these chapters. That's the general idea of Sovev. It's all-encompassing, not in a spatial way, that a distance, but it's not individually modifying itself for every recipient, every part of your body, or every part of the world. Then you have Mamali. Mamali is a level of godliness that takes into consideration every place. For example, in your eye, there's tremendous events going on in your eye that requires much more soul power and much more infusion of godliness into your eyeball than into your toe. Your toe doesn't have a big job. It has a job. It has blood cells and it has skin and it has all the activities that it does, but you can't compare it to the eyeball or to the inner workings of your ear, or to your sense of touch that you have in your fingertips or your tongue that tastes. There's different ways that your soul manifests. That's like Sovev and Mamali. When it comes to levels of soul, there's a different way the soul interacts with one part of the body and the other. That's called Mamali. So we're going back to what we said here, that godliness, that is both Sovev Kalam and both he exists in the world in a way which is all-encompassing. And the way that he interacts with the world in a personal way, giving, for an example, Jerusalem and the Temple Mount and the Holy Temple, much more godliness in a revealed way than you have in the rest of the world. You can't compare that to, somewhere in upstate, northern woods of Wisconsin. While it has some, and the Grand Canyon, you have more because it's beautiful and it makes you feel spiritual, etc. But every place we see is a different amount. And that's why some parts of the day we feel more alive and sometimes we feel less alive, because that's Mamali. That's the soul. How certain times we're more in tune, certain times less in tune. Certain parts of our body are a lot more filled with vibrancy and activity than other parts of our body. But the reality is that the life force itself, the level of Sofer, is equal across all of our body, all of our existence. So that's the first thing we said, that when we do a mitzvah, we're drawing down godliness. What does that mean? God's inner will, God's desire. It doesn't matter if you're putting on tefillin, you're putting a coin in the charity box, or imagine if there was a mitzvah to chop wood. There are weird mitzvahs like that. Don't mix wool and linen. Don't use a red cow for this. I mean, come on, does it make a difference if I do it this way or that way? Yeah, because that's what God wants. The kid wanted a red lollipop and not a blue lollipop. What's the difference? I got him a lollipop. He didn't want a red one. He didn't want a blue one. So God, no matter what the activity is, the fact that you're doing what he wants, that is the level of a mitzvah we're talking about, drawing down God's will into this world. Then we said, it is enclosed in the letters of and the wisdom of Torah and mitzvahs. So in Torah and mitzvahs, there's a very famous thing we all know coming up, is giving the Ten Commandments anniversary, the Shavuos, the anniversary God gave the Ten Commandments at Sinai. When God said, and God had inscribed the Ten Commandments, the first word is Anochi. And there's tremendous amount of commentary explaining why is the first word Anochi, which means I. I am the Lord your God. It could have said Ani, could have said I am, especially it makes more sense because Anochi is an Egyptian word and Ani is Hebrew, and there are many other reasons, many other discussions about this. But one of the very important points that's explained in Chassidus, the word Anochi is made up of 4 letters, each letter standing for another word. And those 4 words are Ana for the Aleph, Ana Nafshi Ksavis Yehavis. I am writing my soul into these words. In other words, God says, I'm injecting myself. I am infusing these words with myself. There's a simple bad metaphor that I can give. When you have a little child that doesn't want to take his medicine, and you mush up his medicine into the applesauce, when he eats the applesauce, he also got the medicine. He doesn't know it, but he got it. So the idea is, when you do a mitzvah, when you study words of Torah, you're actually ingesting God. It's no different than when you mix a protein shake and you add vitamins to the shake, or you put medicine in applesauce, that you're actually consuming the medicine. When you do a mitzvah, since the first word is Anochi, and God says, I invest myself into these words of Torah, into this mitzvah, by doing that mitzvah, by learning that Torah, you're actually absorbing godliness. That's the second point he says. So you're doing a mitzvah, you're taking this level of godliness and actually drawing it down into yourself. And then we have the next point he says here, a tzitzis utfilin. Oh, sorry, I skipped the word. And yeah, tzitzis utfilin. And he says, before, if you noticed, he said talis and tefillin, if you noticed. And now he's saying tzitzis and tefillin. Why did he say talis and tefillin before, and now it's tzitzis and tefillin? See, technically speaking, talis refers to the garment, the big cloth of the tzitzis, or the talis. Tzitzis refers to the strings. If you want to be scientific about the garment of tzitzis, there's 2 words we use, talis or tzitzis, but it means one refers to the garment and one refers to the strings. In truth, the garment is not the mitzvah. The mitzvah of holiness is in the strings. God said, if you have a 4-cornered garment, put tzitzis on the corners. So really the mitzvah is a tzitzis. So earlier we want to give the metaphor of enclothing and wrapping yourself in a mitzvah. There we use the metaphor and we use the expression of talis, referring to the garment. Now that he's talking about the holiness, the sanctity of the mitzvah, he refers to the tzitzis because that's where the sanctity really is. The sanctity of talis is those strings. Technically speaking, the only reason we wear a talis today, by the way, is very interesting. Originally, there was no people wearing a talis and tzitzis on a regular basis, except there was a mitzvah that if you had a 4-cornered garment, you put on tzitzis on the corners. If you have a 4-cornered garment, you don't. And the rabbi said, you know what? If you're not going to have a 4-cornered garment, you can't fulfill this mitzvah. So you should make a 4-cornered garment, and you should wear it as much as you can, and wear it when you daven. In other words, the association of putting on a talis is done more as an opportunity to use this mitzvah of tzitzis. But the mitzvah really is, if you have a four-cornered garment, put on tzitzis. So tzitzis represents the sanctity that is found within the mitzvah of a talis. That's why he says here tzitzis, we're focusing on drawing down godliness into the world. And with tefillin. And he says, you're drawing down godliness onto the chelik elikam mimal mamish. Here's the question. The question is, how in fact can a Jew, if we are so insignificant, and we're so non-existent before God, and we're so unimportant, how can we go and connect to God? Imagine the child who comes into a classroom where Einstein is speaking, some advanced theory. What's the connection? You don't have an understanding of what's going on. You don't begin to feel it. You have no idea the depth of this lecture, and you're standing there as if you belong here. I'm not even talking about a high school student or an elementary student. I'm talking about a toddler. We are less than that and less than that significant before God. How do we stand before God? And the answer is, you know why? Because you have a godly soul. And inside that godly soul feels, and that godly soul understands, and that godly soul is a living, breathing, dynamic, active, tremendously in tune to godliness. Except we don't see it ourselves, we don't feel it, because we're living in a physical world and it's concealed. But when you do a mitzvah, that comes alive and you reveal it. Because in truth, if we think about it, our job really is not to draw down godliness into this world. Our job is to reveal godliness in this world. Because truth is, there is no difference between the Temple Mount, when the temple stood, and where the Beis HaMikdash was, and the Holy of Holies, in theory, between the rest of the world. The difference is, in one place, godliness is revealed, and in the rest of the world, it's concealed. So the main difference between the Holy of Holies and my backyard is, in my backyard, you can't see godliness, though he is there just as present as anywhere else in the holy sanctuaries or the holy place that God made his presence known. Except in my backyard, he's not known, he's hidden. That's the difference between the higher world and the lower worlds. God's found everywhere equally. The question is, how much is he concealed? How much is he seen? So this is the second meditation that we should have when we approach the mitzvah. So the first one is the understanding of the relationship. We are God's subject. We have to have an awe and respect for our relationship with God, and to know that what I do matters. God, as great as he is, and me, as small as I am, God cares what I do. That was the first meditation. Second one is, as you approach a mitzvah, know that through this mitzvah, you're drawing down the essence of God's will into this world, i.e., you're revealing God's presence in this world. Now we're going to come to the third meditation. The third meditation is the one we're most familiar with. And this is the one that was talked about the most, not that it's the least important, but it's the third step in the meditations. And that is understanding how each particular mitzvah has its relationship with a particular part of our psyche or our physical body, drawing down a particular level of godliness into our existence, which means some mitzvahs, the primary thing is love. Some are fear. Some are unity. Some are connecting to my heart. Some are my body. Some are my stomach. Some are my eyes. You have to listen to this mitzvah. Some mitzvahs you listen to the Torah reading. Some you have to see the tzitzis. Some you have to light a Shabbos candle. Some you have to take your hand and give some charity. Every mitzvah, so for an example, there's a beautiful teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, where he explains a particular mitzvah to understand what happens. And he explains the mitzvah of giving charity. And he says he once told his Chassidim, if you want to understand the mitzvah of charity, God's name has 4 letters, Yud, and then a Hey, and then a Vav, and then a Hey. Charity is exactly that. Yud is a little dot. That's a coin. It's a nickel. It's a dime. It's a quarter. Take that dot with your 5 fingers in your hand. That 5 is a Hey. Hey, as we know, is a numerical value of 5. And take your hand. Now you have this Yud and you have this Hey, and stretch it out. That's a Vav. A long figure, that's a Vav. And put it into the hand of a poor man. That's another Hey. Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey, when you do it that way, you're spelling God's name and you're doing it, meaning suddenly in the mitzvah of taking a little coin from our pocket and putting it in the hand of a poor person is not just some nice little I'm such a kind, sensitive guy. I gave the guy a quarter. I made them feel good, even though today they might throw it back at you. That's happened to me. Someone threw back the coin at me more than once. And the bottom line is the act suddenly is a whole meditation or a whole significant way that spirituality is infusing itself in our life. And that's the third meditation. Understanding how each particular mitzvah infuses the world, your soul, the physical elements used, and the whole universe with a particular level of godliness from drawing down from a particular place. Earlier we said that each particular person has their particular part of the world. That we said earlier. Now we're saying, because everyone has their part. Some people have this thing to elevate, some are more in this area or that city or that place, and that we spoke earlier. Now we're talking about how each particular mitzvah elevates a certain aspect of our personal universe. So we're going to go now, and the Alter Rebbe is going to do a fascinating analysis of the mitzvah of tefillin. It's a little technical, but it's very enjoyable, and it gives us a chance to see a mitzvah and a little bit more of the light. It's something we take for granted, and the Alter Rebbe now is going to teach us, for an example, the mitzvah of tefillin, how you see the godliness, at what level of godliness, etc. Let's do that. Oh, I missed the last 4 words of the last paragraph. And we said that by drawing down the godliness in each mitzvah that we do, regardless of what the mitzvah is, we're drawing down that light into our personal space, that we should become one with that light, one with that level of godliness that we're bringing into the world. That was the second meditation. Now he says, V'derech prat. We're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines from the top. First word on the line. V'derech prat. In particular now, he's going through the third level of now a particular mitzvah way you should think about. And this is the order of how we should do it. First, get up and think about who we are, what we are as Jews, our responsibility. Think about what is accomplished by a mitzvah. And then depending what mitzvah you're coming to, if it's making the bracha on separating challah, or you're putting on tefillin, or you're lighting a Shabbos candle, know that that mitzvah has a particular impact on not only your life, but on all of the universe. And here is V'derech prat. V'derech prat tefillin, in particular, we see this for an example with the mitzvah of tefillin, libatel ulikolel, bechinas chachmasei ubinasei shebenafshei elikis. Our job is to nullify, meaning become one, our wisdom and our understanding and our soul. We'll explain it in a second. To become one with God. So first of all, we have to explain an idea. There's a statement that is said many, many times. It comes from the Chumash, that man was made in the image of God. And there are many, many ways this is explained. But the most basic way, it doesn't mean that God has eyes and nose and a mouth. God forbid, God has no shape. It means the same way that God expresses himself into this world, how God manifests the world and draws down his own holiness into the world through the process of creation, which we'll explain in a second. The same way is the makeup of the human body. Or in other words, the same way we could describe all of the spiritual reality that we can understand with our limited understanding, that is the identity of the human being, an individual in general and a Jew in particular. For an example, we know that within the godly spheres and the spiritual realms, there's Chachma, there's the 10 Sephiros, there's Chachma, there's Bina, there's Das. Those are the cognitive powers. That's basically conception, comprehension, and application. Those are the first three. Usually we say Chachma, Bina, Das means wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. But if you want to be a little more scientific and clear, it's really conception, comprehension, and application, which we'll explain in a moment. And then you have the 6 midas, and the 7th one. You have Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Yesod, Malchus. Every single one of us, our neshama is made up of the same thing. We have our Chachma, we have our Bina, we have our Das. We have our Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Yesod, Malchus. Look at the charts. If you Google these spheros, it shows you a chart, and the charts are common to the human body. And then we say it before Shabbos. Our right hand is Chesed, our left hand is Gevurah. How we have all the different aspects of the Kabbalistic form is the human body. In other words, the image of God is the way God designed the human body. So in our animal soul and in our godly soul, we have Chachma, and we have Bina, and we have Das. Just to remind us, in case some of us missed it in the previous discussions, What is chachma? What is bina? What is das? These are the cognitive powers. And the other ones are the emotive traits. Chachma, bina, and das. Chachma is the earliest existence of an idea. We mentioned earlier, ideas pop forth from our subconscious self. When a subconscious self sends forth an idea, that is called chachma. It is a dot. It is a flash that came with no where it came, meaning there's no like clear place where it came from. It came out of nowhere. An idea popped into our head. We might have been thinking about this concept for months, and suddenly, boom, an idea came into my head about it, a solution, an idea. That's like a tiny kernel, like a seed. It is chachma, and bina now is developing that idea, challenging it, questioning it, understanding, and building an entire structure out of this idea. Das is making that idea matter to me and personal. I can have information that doesn't affect me. Why? It's very fascinating. It's very interesting, but it means nothing to me. I'm reading a court case that took place 60 years ago in Argentina, and it's a fascinating court case, and I'm understanding the whole thing. Once the court case is taking place today about my spouse, about my child, suddenly it's personal. The metaphor the Rebbe gives for Chachma Bina, how it comes into Das, is a story about this guy who was illiterate. He lived in a shtetl, and he got a letter, and he doesn't know how to read. So he takes it to the wise man of town. And the wise man reads it and it says, "Dear sir, sorry to inform you, your father passed away." And the person who hears the letter starts crying. And the question is, why is he crying? He barely understands English or Russian, whatever language it was. And the other guy is a smart guy. And the answer is because it's his father. It's not the guy who's reading. Meaning, in order for information to affect you, it has to be personal. If information is not personal, it doesn't affect me. Chachma and Bina, while it's great to have that, it doesn't impact you if it's not personal. So therefore, Das means connection, really. In the Bible, in the Torah, whenever it wants to say that the man and a husband were intimate with each other, how does it say it? And Adam knew Eve. The word is Das. Das means there's a connection. I and that have a connection, and therefore it means something to me. So Chachma is oftentimes referred to as feminine. As masculine. Chachma is the male. In a relationship, a male gives a tiny seed. Bina is the feminine. What does she do, the woman? She takes this tiny seed and develops it into a full child. She takes this seed and she creates it into arms and legs and sinews and body parts, meaning she develops it. So Chachma is the initial idea, which really has everything included in it, but not in an expressed way. That earliest seed has in it the color of the eyes, and it has the nature of the character in certain ways, the color of the hair. It has if it's going to be tall or short. All the DNA is there in this insignificant, non-seen entity, which is tiny. And it doesn't mean that if you look under a magnifying glass, you're going to see a tiny person there. It means the power, the information, the instructions are all there. But it's in a level of bittul. It doesn't express itself. It doesn't identify as its own identity. It's just there as potential to come into reality. And the woman develops it. That's Chachma and Bina. So we're going to see in a moment. I'm telling you all this information because it's important for the next few lines here. So the first step is, tefillin means that I'm taking the chachma and bina of my soul, my godly soul, and I'm channeling it to be in tune, meaning God gave us these tools. Imagine you're an employee in a business, and the company gives you a computer, or it gives you a briefcase, or it gives you a desk. Now, what you use that desk for depends if you're being honest to your employment or not. If you're, let's say, your computer, if you're sitting on the computer chatting with friends or playing video games, then you're abusing what it was there for. But if you're using your computer to do the business that you were instructed to do, then you're following instructions and doing what you're supposed to. God gave us Chachma and Bina. God gave us the ability to conceive ideas. God gave us the ability to develop ideas, to comprehend them. Now, what are we using these two things for, Chachma and Bina? So when you put on tefillin on your head, let's go further. And our job is to go and make sure that our comprehension and our conception and comprehension are being used and fused for godly purposes. And now he goes into the details of this meditation. So just to understand, I'm not sure how much you're familiar with tefillin, but we're going to have a little, the biology of tefillin. What is a pair of tefillin? A lot of people who are not that familiar with tefillin see it as a leather box, or don't even know it's leather. They see it as a box. The tefillin, by the way, in general, there's two general ways to make the boxes. One is from very thin parchment, which is made like origami, where it's folded many times and creates the shape of tefillin. Another one is taking the jowls of a cow, which is a very heavy, coarse leather, and working it over months in special machines and hydraulic presses and making the boxes. The boxes themselves can cost a few $100s. You see a pair of tefillin today, if you're getting it for less than $300, you better check if it's real or not. Because just the boxes of the tefillin that I bought for my kids cost about $300 or $400 just for the boxes. I'm not even getting into the scrolls yet. So the boxes, then these are leather straps. The boxes are casings. Now the box of the hand tefillin is a very simple inside. It's one box inside where there's a roll with a scroll of 4 portions. Every pair of tefillin has twice the same 4 portions. Once in the head and once in the arm tefillin. In the arm tefillin, you have 4 portions rolled up into one scroll. In the head tefillin, you have 4 portions on 4 separate scrolls and 4 separate compartments. That means inside there's actually 4 compartments of each one has another one of these 4 little scrolls, but instead of rolled up, they're actually folded because you can't roll it up and stick it in there. It's actually folded, and that's one of the reasons you check them regularly, because sometimes folding them, they can become cracked from sitting in a certain position. But the bottom line is, you have 4 chapters. What are these chapters? 2 chapters are from V'eschanan. It's the first 2 chapters are Kadesh and V'hoya Kiviyacha. Kadesh is the chapter that talks about the mitzvah of the firstborn son. That the firstborn son technically belongs to God. You have to redeem him. That's Kadesh. V'hoya Kiviyacha is the second chapter, and that talks about that when you come into the land and your son's going to ask you about Passover, explain it to him. And it's all the things of how to explain to your son the questions that he's going to ask. The next portion is a famous portion of Shema. Everyone knows the Shema. We cover our eyes for the first Shema, the first pasuk, and then we say, "V'yahavta, you shall love you in God," etc. And then you have the 4th chapter of the Tefillin is V'hoya im Shemoah. God says the second portion of Shema, if you will listen to what I say, good, and if not, it won't be so good. And he tells you basically to listen to the commandments that I tell you. These are the 4 chapters found in every single pair of Tefillin. I'm not going to get into it now. Maybe we could discuss it after the thing later, the different opinions of the order, and it all affects how we understand what they are. So in Zohar, it explains that these 4 chapters correspond to these 3 things of Chachma, Bina, and Das. And you might ask, how does 4 correspond to 3? Because really, Das, application, really has 2 channels. When you think about something, the emotion that it might create going into the world of emotion after it goes through your intellectual or cognitive abilities could take the track of love or take the track of fear. What you think about could take one track that makes you love someone, or as we see the true definition of chesed is attraction, or the true definition of gevura is rejection. Your feelings could either create a feeling of attraction or a feeling of rejection, whether it's an idea, a person, a behavior, a food, a experience. So therefore, Das really has 2 channels. So we have Chachma is the first chapter, Bina is the second chapter, and the last 2 chapters are the 2 segments of Chesed and Gevura, the 2 channels within Das. I hope everyone's still with me. It's a little technical, but it's an interesting, good thing to know about tefillin. It gives you a little more depth when you suddenly when you have someone in your family putting on tefillin, you can say, hey, you think about this for a minute, what you're doing. You realize what's going on here. Now, how do these chapters correspond to the above mentioned Chachma, Bina, and 2 channels of Das? So the first chapter we said is Kadesh. Kadesh is Kedusha. The word Kadesh, of sanctifying your firstborn son, has 2 elements that are all about Chachma. Chachma's definition really is bittul. And this is actually an idea we could talk about at length, but it's a really important thing to know if you're studying any Chassidus. Chachma, which really is the first step of understanding, is really bittul. You cannot focus on details yet. You cannot express your own questions yet. Don't ask. Just absorb the initial idea. It's almost like if imagine you walked into a cabin and you were lost in the forest. I heard this metaphor from someone else, I'm using it. Imagine you walked in a forest and you came into a pitch black cabin and you cannot see a thing, you have no flashlight, it's pitch black, and suddenly there's a flash of lightning. And for a split second, the entire room was lit up, and then it was dark again. At that moment that it was lit up, you saw the entire room. But there was no expression or each detail that you saw. Afterwards, you couldn't think for a second, 1 second. I saw a staircase to my left. There was a table in front of me. I saw 1 second to the right, there was a window, meaning you could start now reflecting. Now, after Chachma is when you can have self-involved. Chachma, there's no self. As a matter of fact, the word chachma is made up of two words, koach ma, the power of what? What means I don't know. I don't know, it's beyond me. The initial stage of any idea, like that initial seed that the husband gives to create a child, while everything's included, has no identity. There's no way you could say, oh, I guess look at this and see. No, there's no identity, it's complete, but everything's there. That's chachma. So chachma represents absolute bittul. There's no self. That is the idea of kedusha. What's kedusha mean? When something is holy, what is the true definition of being holy? The truest definition, we say, a Rebbe is very holy. Holy means it's transparent. There's no self. I just see my truth, my creator, my power, my source. You look at a tzaddik, you don't see him. You see his creator. When the more something is holy, the more you see its truth. When you look at a cup of coffee, you can't see God. Even though its whole existence is God making it exist. You look at a prayer book, oh, I look at this, I see some godliness. Holiness means less of self blocking the truth, or in other words, transparency. So Kedusha, Kadesh, the first chapter, means sanctity, or in other words, it means humility or transparency. Therefore, the first chapter of the tefillin that you have inside the tefillin, Kadesh, it talks about, number one, sanctity, and number two, the firstborn son, Bechar. As you know, Bechar is the first. What's the first stage of the process of the human or the Jewish or the cosmic process? Is Chachma. That's why the first chapter is Chachma. The second chapter is Bina. Bina, we said, develops idea. Remember the second chapter is the child asking questions. Now Bina is the stage where you come into the land and the child has a question. Now you can start challenging, analyzing, understanding. So the second chapter of Tefillin represents that which is developing an idea, allowing room for questions, meaning now I can start asking and understanding, how does it make sense? And that's the second stage of Judaism and the second stage of development of self. That's an idea. Idea pops into your head. Good. Chachma happened. Does it make sense? How do I apply it? Does it work? And all the questions until you ask and build and you develop an entire child, so to speak. The third chapter talks about the portion of Shema. How does the Shema start off? The second verse, via hafta. You shall love the Lord your God with all your, etc. In other words, the third chapter is das expressed in love. The fourth chapter is fear. If you don't do this, then it's not going to be good. If you listen, something. So we see that the four chapters that are inserted inside the tefillin represent chachma, bina, and the two channels of love and fear, or attraction and rejection, of das. So now we're getting to see a little glimpse, again, a lot of technicality, but a very important understanding of how the mitzvah of tefillin encompasses within it a tremendous amount of spiritual meaning. And then we're going to talk about the order, and I'm going to basically finish off right now because I want to take it from here next week. It's already almost 11 o'clock. But the short is, today we went through the process of 3 steps in meditation, so to speak. And if someone is going to say at the end of this page, which I just want to give it forward now, because it's good to hear it now, even if you can't fully create any of these feelings, but going through this exercise, because you have a godly soul inside of you, because I have a godly soul inside of me, that's my true identity, going through this exercise, even if I don't feel it, has an impact. It's like a teenage child who's mad at their parents, and you say, just think for a second how much your parent loves you. And you might say, I don't feel it right now. It doesn't matter. Trust me. It's going to come back to you. Meaning, a teenage child has so much self, so much identity, so much confusion mixed into the development of self, they can't properly articulate what they're really feeling inside. Unless, God forbid, there's an accident or emergency or a tragedy where suddenly all self was put aside. But in general, our lives are so much distracted by self and the feelings and my own ego and my own things that make me happy or upset or angry, that it's hard to be in tune to these true, sensitive, and ultimately most important feelings. But just going through the exercise has an effect. So he's going to say here that these 3 steps of, number 1, knowing that we have to have step 1 of Judaism is respect, i.e. recognizing our role. We're very small, we're very insignificant, yet God tells us that what you do matters. Step number 2, that when you do a mitzvah, you're drawing down God's will into this world. And step number 3, depending on what mitzvah I'm doing, how I understand this particular experience, these are the things to engage in your mind prior to doing any mitzvah or starting off your day, and as we'll see in the development of this chapter. But this is the opening of the last 13 chapters of Tanya, telling us first in the area of fear, and then after 3 chapters we'll do of love, how to develop the right emotions in serving God. We'll stop here. Anyone has questions, now's the time to ask it. And again, it was a mouthful today, but these are important stuff.